pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Wyatt. Here. Stabell.
Here.
Bunce.
Present.
Reister.
Here.
Engel. Here.
You have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Anything to remove from the consent agenda? If not, can I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign. No comments or commendations? Moved up the citizens' request and oral presentation so we can let Clark get out of here early.
Okay.
Clark Porter, correct?
Yeah, Clark Porter, yeah. Hi. I can stand over here, I guess, and quit this.
We got a, you got a slide presentation, you wanna walk us through right up here?
Yeah, so I'm from the Blackhawk Creek Water and Soil Coalition.
Does it matter that the camera,
No, it's fine.
He's fine.
Oh,
That's fine. Don't worry about it.
You're good, you're good.
didn't even notice.
No, you're fine.
Okay. All right, I'm the president of Blackhawk Creek Water and Soil Coalition. We are licensed with the state as a nonprofit. We're not a 501c3, just incorporated with the state at this point in time. And we meet for our board meetings at the Hudson Public Library. And they've been very accommodating, really nice facility. We really appreciate that opportunity, so it's been very nice. And Hudson is kind of a central town for the watershed. It is a 217,000 acre watershed, so center is probably upstream a ways, but nonetheless, this is a critical part of the watershed in the beginning of the kind of heavy use recreation area from about Hudson on down to the mouth of the Cedar River as far as for kayaking, hiking, biking, that kind of thing. Whereas primarily upstream from here, you find a lot more interaction with the river, through agriculture. Anyway, what my presentation about, the reason I wanted to talk with you is just to kind of present an invitation to you to for us to kind of continue dialogue in the months and potentially years ahead. And I'll back up a little bit just to explain. It's an invitation to participate with us in solving problems as well as perhaps having some opportunities. Where am I? Can I just do this one?
Yep.
Okay, great. Let me back up a little bit. Of course, we are in the Mississippi watershed, and watersheds are kind of like nesting eggs. The definition of a watershed is just an area that's drained by a body of water. In this case, the Mississippi watershed extends all the way up into Canada in the northwest there. And then Blackhawk Creek is in the Middle Cedar watershed. These are critical Iowa watersheds for what's called the Iowa Watershed Approach, which has been a legislative and funding initiative. There's been 2 phases of it, and the latter phase has concentrated on a number of the blue watersheds there. You see the Middle Cedar. And the Middle Cedar Watershed Management Authority, perhaps you've heard of that. Steve Jordan sits on attends those meetings with the Middle Cedar Watershed Management Authority. They have $11 million, a little over $11 million from HUD and some other funds that are available for cost share and other grant opportunities for watershed cleanup. And their primary orientation is towards flood mitigation, but also water quality. Then, within the Middle Cedar watershed, the yellow area is Blackhawk Creek watershed. It's 339 square miles, 217,000 acres. The largest watershed and watershed group of what you see there, Wolf Creek is pretty large as well, and Beaver Creek, but neither of those have a watershed group. And I just started the Blackhawk Creek watershed group not quite a year ago. So hopefully something will develop for the others. Within Blackhawk Creek watershed then, I'm sorry, I apologize for the slide there, but you can kind of see the divisions there. Every one of those little yellow areas are what's called a HUC 8. HUC stands for Hydrologic Unit Code, excuse me, HUC 12. And the higher the number, the smaller the watershed. So those are all HUC 12s. And the reds are HUC 10s. I believe the whole watershed is, I don't know what, I'm I'm not exactly sure, because Middle Cedar is a Huck 8, so. Anyway, and it's deceptive how much area is drained by Black Hawk Creek. You know, because sometimes you go out and look at it, you think, that much area, really? You know, but there's a lot of interaction between groundwater and creek water in our area, and even more so the further northeast you get. Huck 12 watersheds within, and the Huck 12s are important because that's the scale at which often watershed plans are developed for cleanup, and then the watershed plans become a foundation for seeking grants. And I wanted to point out this, that the Huck 12 watersheds within the Black Hawk Creek watershed, the purple there is Wilson Creek watershed, and Hudson is within that. And then right adjacent to it, going into Grundy County, is the village of Rhinebeck watershed. And yeah, they have
Yeah, Rhinebeck's right here.
Rhinebeck
Hudson's
there,
right
Wilson Creek's there.
Grundy Center over here.
Right, and then up from Grundy Center a ways is Holland Creek watershed. Okay, those three, Wilson Creek, Village of Rhinebeck, and Holland Creek, are all going to have Huck 12 plans done for them by different entities. Holland Creek, the Iowa Soybean Association, is funding that and coordinating in conjunction with our organization, and then and the Grundy County Soil and Water Conservation District. Village of Rhinebeck is going to have a Huck 12 watershed plan done by a firm called EOR. And they're an environmental engineering firm that was contracted with with the Middle Cedar Watershed Management Authority. And then Wilson Creek is also going to be done by EOR and Iowa Soybean Association. And we almost lost funding for that study, but then we got it back because the Iowa Agricultural Water Alliance came in with some funding for the study. The studies are quite expensive, they're quite extensive. And once they're done, priorities are developed for the watershed in terms of where you get the biggest bang for the buck as far as various methods of water cleanup, whether it's anything from stormwater runoff to bioreactors at the edge of fields to cost share initiatives for farmers to plant cover crops, for instance. There's a variety of, and that's just a few techniques or methods. Anyway, so I invite you to, the city, to consider, and people that you talk with, to consider sharing and solving some of our problems, whether it's from flooding to nutrient pollution. We see that can kind of often lead to algae blooms. And flooding there, that's one of our fields. I farm by Rhinebeck. And so, and we have seen a lot more flooding along Black Hawk Creek, and anybody who's lived along it will tell you it's increased. And I have USGS data from the Cedar River, just below where the mouth of the creek is, to substantiate that claim. You've probably heard about the hypoxic zone in the Gulf of Mexico as a result of nutrient pollution. It was the size of Connecticut last year, and then we broke all records this year. It was the size of New Jersey. It's a result of nutrient pollution and algae blooms that die off and rob the water of oxygen. And this is one of the major, it's an ecological disaster. It's one of the major impetuses for reducing nutrient pollution throughout the Midwest and the the Mississippi River Basin. Stormwater runoff, of course, is another huge issue. And soil erosion. Phosphorus clings to soil particles, and that's how you get phosphorus in the water, which also leads to those algae blooms. And then the loss of soil. That's Black Hawk Creek right there. That's right by the Rancho Road Bridge, and you can see that column of mud going down. There's a side creek that's quite clear, and then all of a sudden you just get this wall of suspended soil particles. Black Hawk Creek is very high in nitrates. It dumps 2,720 tons of nitrates into the Cedar River every year. That's a 15-year average from the USGS. It ranks very high in turbidity, which is the lack of water clarity, like that picture, a lot of suspended soil particles, a lot of bank erosion. You've probably noticed bank sloughing. The creek keeps getting wider with increased water flow. And also E. coli infestation. It's listed as an impaired waterway in the state due to E. coli. Our nitrate concentrations there, you can see, that's, this 2007, over on the right is actually nitrate measures ranging, dating back to 1906 all the way to 2015, and that's in Cedar Rapids, in the Cedar River and Cedar Rapids. The dark green is maximum yields of nitrogen, and the light green is averages. So, had an increase with modern farming methods. Flooding, you can see Cedar River, this is a trend line from 1941 to 2015, showing high water and overall water flow through the Cedar River. Anyway, I want to get to the opportunities, not just the problems. Just to quote Henry Ford, we often miss an opportunity because it's dressed in overalls and looks like work. And there is work.
Oops.
to be done with this. But first of all, you've perhaps heard of the Iowa Nutrient Reduction Strategy. It's not a law, it's a strategy, it's voluntary. It was endorsed by Governor Branstad, it's continued by Governor Reynolds. There's strategies developed for both point and non-point sources of water pollution. Point sources being, you know, like a factory, for instance, or a city outflow from a sewage treatment, and non-point sources being like farm fields or storm sewers, that kind of thing. Agriculture is largely a non-point source, and our goal is to reduce nutrient pollution within in the Iowa waters by 45%. And we're nowhere near reaching that goal. But we can point to progress and to a real kind of consciousness of it at the state level. Like, I mean, each year, there's more and more conversation about it and more and more. And Governor Reynolds claimed that the first bill she wants to see across her desk this year has to do with water quality. Water quality legislation will continue. It's going to continue the nutrient reduction strategy, and the bills that I'm seeing being proposed now are going to promote partnerships within watersheds, which is a great idea because a watershed cuts across all political entities. A watershed doesn't pay attention to county lines or city limits or fence lines or parking lots versus fields versus, I mean, water is ubiquitous, and so it calls upon us to develop new types of partnerships and to develop and kind of transcend typical political spheres of influence. So there's going to need to be a lot of cooperation. I mentioned the Huck 12s, the Holland Creek, Wilson Creek, Village of Rhinebeck, they're all getting the plans done for them. There's going to be a huge plan for the Middle Cedar River Watershed Management Authority for the entire Middle Cedar. And so Wilson Creek and Blackhawk Creek, I mean, this is where you here in Hudson are definitely impacted. And the watershed plans that I talked about will develop. If you can kind of see this map, this is from a Lime Creek watershed, which is up by Independence. Independence is up on the right northeast corner of that map. Lime Creek is much smaller than Blackhawk Creek, but the Iowa Soybean Association did a plan for it, and this is kind of their recommendation for practices and where they want to see those done throughout the watershed. And when we have this plan done with EOR and the Iowa Ag Water Alliance for Wilson Creek watershed and Village of Rhinebeck watershed, we'll see similar maps and similar recommendations for practices, and then that presents an opportunity to go after grants. And it isn't just agricultural. I mean, there's an opportunity, and this is where, as all of you, I just wanted to alert you to the fact that there's an opportunity for input on your part, and there will also be invitations for input from citizens within Hudson and throughout the county and multiple counties. There's going to be public input meetings. This is from one that was held a week ago in Cedar Falls, having to do with the Middle Cedar River. It was an open house and invited people in. They had several displays. People put push pins on maps of where they lived in the watershed, and then they were given the opportunity to provide input about any problems they see or any goals they might have, anything they'd like to see happen with community and community-wide watershed plans. We had a community meeting last week in Holland, Iowa, over the Holland Creek watershed. This was the room here. We had citizens from town as well as farmers. Farm Bureau was well represented, as well as the Soil and Water Conservation District. People from USDA office, NRCS, FSA, were all at the meeting providing input about what they wanted to see happen with the watershed. And we're gonna have a follow-up meeting in a couple of months. And then that's, along with testing of the water and soil samples and all those kinds of things. A lot of data goes into this, but the social input, social data is some of the most important. Another opportunity that exists within the watershed planning and cooperation is a disaster preparedness. Middle Cedar Watershed Management Authority is working right now to have FEMA hazard mitigation funds be wrapped up with their watershed planning, so that the watershed plan that the Middle Cedar Watershed Management Authority develops can serve as a foundation or an anchor point for communities to also seek FEMA dollars. They don't have to go do another study. They can use that as the basis for that. And so that's another opportunity within the watershed planning. I wish I could tell you more details about that. They gave me a quick rundown on a kind of a thumbnail sketch of it earlier, and it's still in process, and my brain is still trying to kind of comprehend it. Finally, recreation, and with Greenbelt and kayaking along the creek and everything. One of the unique things about from Hudson to Waterloo is that Blackhawk Creek is surrounded almost entirely by public property. That's the green, and pink is private. And so there's much more opportunity for public access and public recreation. And there's a water trails committee right now for Cedar River water, as well as one segment from Hudson to Waterloo is going to be considered in the watershed planning and intercog, and which might be an opportunity as well for Hudson in terms of developing recreational opportunities and access and education opportunities as well. This is a kids' water garden, and there are funds available through watershed planning for public education and public projects. So, with that, I just want to conclude, there's two upcoming events. There's at the Grundy County Conservation Board headquarters, we have a public meeting from 1:30 to 2:30 for the Blackhawk Creek Water and Soil Coalition. I have those about quarterly, just to kind of share information around the watershed. And then on the same day, that evening, there will be, and I forgot to put the time, but it's from 6 to 8:30. There will be a farmer conference, and the topic will be what to expect: markets, weeds, and water quality. So,
could you tell us the street address of the Conservation Board headquarters?
oh gosh, well, it's in Morrison, Iowa.
That's probably enough.
That's enough. Yeah, I don't
Is it at the
actually know the
Morris
street
Inn? Because I
address.
thought that's the only building there.
Yeah, if you go past the Morris Inn,
Yeah.
and it will be on your left down about a block and a half. And
Only in Iowa can you give those types of directions.
yeah, so, and I don't have the address, but yeah,
Oh,
6 to 8:30 is the conference, so.
I got a question.
Mhm.
This is all new to me, and I appreciate the presentation.
Yeah.
Does anyone oppose this stuff, and on what grounds?
Yeah, the opposition that I've primarily witnessed or experienced myself even, is usually from landowners, farmers who, in particular, who are concerned about unfunded mandates and regulations coming down the pike. So, the Des Moines lawsuit with Waterworks has scared a lot of people, so there's that kind of raised a level of consternation. It also raised a level of awareness, like some of those things do too. So, I mean, one can look at it in two ways, but it did raise a lot of consternation. People developed a lot of anxiety over, will they be sued? Will they be told they have to do something, take some land out of production without compensation, or things like that. So that's probably the primary source of opposition. The next isn't so much opposition as just sort of inertia. You know, I heard one reporter describe getting people involved in projects like this as it's rather like leading a hippo by the whisker. And so there's kind of a need to kind of light fires under various, get them concerned about it. Some of these things aren't real visible. Some of these problems are visible. You can look and see turbidity of the creek. I wish nitrates had a color, because if they did, everybody would be concerned. You know, that kind of thing becomes kind of invisible. And of course, there's concern about nitrates, because, I mean, all of us, I put on fertilizers, you know, I mean, we all, and it isn't just chemical fertilizers are the problem, it's also the lack oftentimes of living roots in the soil, you know, so I use cover crops to try to take up some of those nutrients and keep them on our property. We pay for the nitrates too, we pay for the nitrogen, and just as soon keep it as opposed to send it to the Gulf. And it's not simply an ethical, environmental issue, it is an economic one. But there are, there are concerns about that too, because it involves changes in practices and expenses. And it is expensive to plant cover crops. And there isn't any ongoing funding source for farmers. I mean, you can burn through them after a while where you aren't gonna get a cost share, And so, that's where there's the primary concerns that I've run into. And then probably the recreation issue, water trails concern people too, just like bike trails or other things where the public is suddenly invited on private property. That can, I'm always careful when I talk to the Farm Bureau, I said, I'm not representing water trails. I'm not here today to talk to you about kayakers on your property, I'm here to talk about creek and watershed,
We're kind of lucky because of that green space already, you don't have to deal with that.
Yes, you don't have that issue, but if you just, otherwise you would.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Clark.
Yeah,
Appreciate
you
it.
bet, thank you, I'm sorry, I know I went over time.
Oh, that's okay. You've got my card, so if you keep me on
Yeah.
distribution of when those meetings occur, I'll
I will,
try to possibly step in on
thank you.
those once in a while.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, I will. I wanted to let you know, because you might be hearing from citizens, you certainly will see flyers and things like that in the upcoming months. It might be a few months till Wilson Creek gets on board. It might be towards, I don't know, really, EOR hasn't even said, but they will be out there. People will start talking about it, so I wanted to let you know.
Super. Hey, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate you giving me the time, and I apologize once again.
Oh, no problem.
Fine.
Informative.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you.
see you later.
Thank you.
Committee reports, Public Works Committee, Scott?
Yes, we met the 10th, at 7 a.m. We discussed an approved sewer adjustment for 202 Celeste, and then we reviewed budgets for water, sewer, and streets. And we recommended approval. And that was it. We adjourned at 7:21.
Any questions for Scott? Thank you, Scott. Mayor's Task Force meeting. We met January 16th at 5 p.m. The primary thing we did there was have a presentation from the Greater Cedar Valley Alliance and Chamber, walking us through the what we should consider as benefits. What we had done, and we researched in the City of Hudson had been a member up until 2013, and then it was dropped. And what we are recommending later for discussion is to go ahead and re-up with them. They're having a 3-year campaign, so we'll talk about that a little bit. We also talked about the splash pad project. Kate gave us a little update on that she's shooting for fundraising to get up to $55,000 to be able to order equipment. Total project somewhere around $155,000. And she's going to start working at going after grants. So.
Pool. Yeah, it's cheaper.
Yeah, much cheaper than the pool. We talked about the 2018-19 budget and forwarded our side on to Personnel Committee for recommendation on to council. Any questions? Next, Public Safety Committee. Kate?
We met January 18th. We had a couple of residents come who happen to both live up in the Northern Tier section, wanting to talk about ATV and UTV operations on the streets up there. We kind of we've discussed this in the past multiple times. Chief Marsh was not able to attend this meeting, but him and I did discuss it prior to the meeting. You know, and his big factor is always that UTVs have a much higher speed limit availability than anything else. And then we have some issues too with some research ongoing about we have to designate the trails in any trail that an ATV or UTV could go on. Any street would have to be designated as an ATV UTV trail, which then DNR rules supersede any other rules. So technically if you're 12 and take a safety course, you could drive on those roads. So there's some things back and forth, but we told them that we would still continue to research some more. And Chief Marsh and I have talked that if the county creates ATV and UTV trails that you could actually go out of Hudson onto, that may be an entirely different discussion as well. But since you're really landlocked, that it's difficult to do at this point. But I did assure the people that came that we will continue to talk about it and research it and see what we can do. And then we discussed the budget and recommended that to go to the Personnel Committee. And then we adjourned.
Any questions for Kate? Thank you, Kate. No public hearings, no ordinances, so we'll go to item A in general government. Discussion action to approve resolution 2348, a resolution setting a public hearing to amend sections 165 and 166 of the City of Hudson Code of Ordinances, and I think that's setting the public hearing for February 12th. So moved. Here a second?
I second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Reister.
Aye.
Engel.
Aye.
Buns.
Aye.
Stabell.
Aye.
Wyatt.
Aye.
5-0. Item B, discussion action to approve resolution 2349, a resolution of the Hudson City Council to support the Greater Cedar Valley 2021 plan.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion. We,
Just
myself
can you just
and,
give a little, I
yeah.
mean, I read it,
We
but
kind
I,
of, we
there
are,
was just so much information
we
and I
truly-
was trying to find what is our benefit to doing
exactly,
this?
and that's why we had Rich Schaefer come to our meeting, and that was my question to him, and was specifically, all right, I understand what you do for Waterloo, Cedar Falls, Cedar Valley area. I attend a lot of Cedar Valley Chamber events already because I am a member through Waterloo through my job. But Hudson being a different, complete entity, what can you do for us? That was my straight out question to him. And we talked a lot about one of the things that they're really working on and what this Project 2021 is really focuses around talent, getting talent to our area and retaining talent in the area of people that want to live in the Cedar Valley and work in the Cedar Valley at the same time. And they are doing some things like videos, like promotional things like that, that I asked, can we specifically have Hudson involved in some of these? Why are, or can you come to Hudson and do some of this? Because a lot of this, even though we don't have the industrial capabilities in our town, there's a lot of people that this talent could come and want to live in Hudson and still work, because this is a huge benefit to the Cedar Valley as our community as well. And they agreed with that. And I know they said they have some extra projects that they're working on, like a livability magazine that's coming out that they're gonna try to work with us on to have specific sections about maybe the smaller communities and what those bring to the Cedar Valley area. Things like that. But they also have options that, it's one of these things that we're gonna get what we put into it as well. There are options for networking events as far as community to community, legislative events that they work with, as well as information that they can help us gather and report in the Cedar Valley to help us put together things to promote Hudson. Ideas like that, and I think it's just a very important economic committee to be a part of with the growth we're going to experience in the next few years.
the commitment under this would be, they're asking for a 3-year commitment under this Cedar Valley 2021, 18, 19, 2021. And what they're looking from us is $1,000 per year. their total budget is probably a couple $100,000 a year, at least $100,000.
Yeah, they're looking for, this 2021 is looking for a $3 million overall fundraiser that they're looking for. I think 3 or 3.5 million, one of the two. And they've already got about like 1.75 million of it raised, so this is part of it that goes into that. There's a lot of big businesses in the Cedar Valley area that put in their own money towards this type of thing too. Because it is towards, again, attracting and retaining talent in the area to help us continue to grow our economic footprint in the entire Cedar Valley. I know the city of Waverly is just getting on board with it as well. Independence, they said, Rhinebeck or Trayer, one of the two they were.
One of the two of them, and they talked about, as I recall the discussion, part of it, you know, some organizations belong to it, and that might be based upon employment, recommended dues. Ours would have been based upon attendance, and I think the calculation, Christie done it, if we went straight to their dues structure, it's like $948 a year. So the 1,000 is simply a rounded up scenario, but they'd like it on a 3-year commitment to be able to say, hey, yeah, we'll include you. You know, from my perspective, I was involved in the past in some discussions in past years about whether to continue on, because what do you do for us compared to, well, you're pitching Waterloo and Cedar Falls. Well, we gotta realize Waterloo and Cedar Falls are 45 times our size. So that's normal that we're not gonna be a primary spot. But what I liked about their discussion was the fact that they were focusing now on livability indexes of the small communities. Okay, maybe Waterloo and Cedar Falls are gonna have the businesses that employs, but what we have to sell is a different lifestyle. And the fact that they would actually go in and meet with the school, have the school activities in there somehow within this. I think from my perspective, I'm not sold on it necessarily figuring how we would get our return on investment, but what I'm very concerned about is if they have this publication and advertising campaign and everything else that they're planning on doing, and other towns are in it and we're not. I'm worried that if we don't spend the $1,000, we're gonna lose a heck of a lot more than that just by not being in it. And then somebody's gonna say, why aren't you in it? Why isn't Hudson in there?
So I think $1,000 actually is reasonable, I think. But to your point, I also think like, what are we really gonna get out of this? And can they actually, in good faith, whether we're part of this or not, leave Hudson out of the equation? I mean, I think Hudson
No.
is set up
Right.
to thrive on its own merits without any investment. And this, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, if I was John Deere, or if I was Waterloo or Cedar Falls, and I was trying to attract talent that will stay here,
Oh, you're
I
certainly
mean,
gonna
I would
build
wear
this.
Hudson on the front of my shirt, because there's a whole group of people who want their kids in small
Yeah.
schools,
We
who
talked
wanna be in small
specifically about
communities.
And,
And I don't really need them to do my bidding for
Right.
me, because our story sells
but,
itself.
and I think that's where the $1,000 and us being part of the greater Cedar Valley Alliance, it shows we're willing to be part of this overall group rather than saying, no, we can do it ourselves. Even though I may think we could do it ourselves, the attitude could more than shoot you. All we need is one more resident to come into the town, and we've got our $1,000 back in property taxes. That's all it takes. So, to me, I'm not concerned at all that we'll have the money back. It's just, I'm afraid that we could be portrayed in a poor light within the Cedar Valley of, okay, Hudson just has an ego trip.
And I don't even know if I agree with that to a point, but I think that there are additional things that we can certainly get out of this partnership with them. They do a lot of reporting and stats that we can do that we can use, as well as they have like a job board that we can use on their website, which we right now pay for some of that stuff right now that we can use with that they're really trying to pump up. You know, some of the retail spots, we talked about that too, that you know, Hudson's not gonna, we've got some open retail spots right on our front Main Street right here. What can you do to help us fill those? You know, because some of those are not necessarily a front door, we don't need well, we tried a flower shop, we tried a restaurant. Maybe it's more of a insurance office, or, you know, something that's a bookkeeping type of place that needs a spot rather than that. And they have some of those connections that we can get to for that. And I think those connections are the big part of it. And what they say about the different communities and everything going on. I think it's you know, like I said, I've been involved with it for quite a few years, as far as through State Farm. And the networking that I've been able to get, even talking about Hudson at some of these events, that I'm like, hey, what are you guys gonna do? Or Betty Wood and I we were at a morning breakfast this week, or last week, I guess it was. And I said, hey Betty, how do I get one of these breakfast things in, or I need a business after hours in Hudson, because we had the Caldwell Ford one here just this past year. For the breakfast, I said, I want a business after hours in Hudson. And she's like, well, it would be 2019. I'm like, all right, D&W floor covering's gonna have it. And she's like, okay, I'll write it down, I'll email it to you. And I'm like, cool, because that gets all these people to come into it. And then I texted Corey and I said, hey, what do you think about having one of these business after hours in your place? He's like, I suppose we could do that. I said, good, because I already volunteered. You know, so it's some things like that that, you know, we have to be a member to be able to get some of those benefits into it. The breakfast at Caldwell was one of the biggest things I think we could have done last year, to have that many business people from the Cedar Valley actually come into the town of Hudson.
Kate, isn't the
and that's
chamber
what-
already a member though?
The chamber's a member, but the city's not a member. So, and that's a completely separate what we're working with them. So, yeah, it would be nice if we could combine, it's just not the way it works with them, unfortunately we asked about that. You know, so there are some separate things that we're working with the chamber separately from what the city would do, but I do think it's one of those community things that we get involved in, we're gonna get what we put into it.
But you're here for another 4 years, so you're already in it, so you can just. I'm sorry, I have to be funny sometimes.
You're here for another 2 years, you can go too.
No, you got it handled.
So, yeah, I think there's a lot
To
of good
Jim's
opportunity.
point, the city is not in it, but the chamber is,
Right now.
so we would have access to all this information.
Yes.
We wouldn't be able to necessarily put the city of Hudson name on it, to the extent that we can if we have our own membership. In my opinion, from the discussion.
But the city's a member of the chamber, right?
Yes.
I think that if I was Denver or Waverly or Rhinebeck, I would be doing this, because we need help selling ourselves, because distance. I just think Hudson is so well
I still
positioned to
think-
go on its own.
I agree, but I still think you've gotta be involved with the whole area.
Are we like one of the few that are not members? Do we know like for sure, I mean, is Evansdale, is Raymond, is Gilbertville, is
I don't-
Laporte?
I don't know about those.
Don't know.
City
City,
and chamber,
yeah.
I mean, do they?
Well, in some of
are
those
they-
towns, Laporte doesn't have a chamber, I don't believe. There's a couple of those that don't have, some of the smaller ones.
I can find out for you for
We could
Elkhorn
definitely
Heights.
find out if anybody wants to table it.
I mean, I
I
believe
can
in
find
this
out for Raymond, I
organization, we
can find out for
belong to
Elkhorn
it
Heights.
at work, and donate or contribute to their cause. So I do believe they do good things. I'm just wondering if they're trying to double dip here, is all I'm asking the question.
Well, and it was more us going to them,
Okay.
To say,
Because
what
the
can you
fact
do for
of-
us as a city?
yeah.
Let me see if they have a list of memberships on their website.
They kind of do. I was looking at them myself. Have we motioned and seconded?
We have motioned and seconded.
Evanston belongs to-
Yeah.
We're already a member of the chamber, then we should already be.
I'll give a short opening for a motion for a table if anybody wishes to, otherwise I'm gonna take it to a vote.
Is there a list?
I'm on the website right now.
That's what I'm trying to see too.
Business directory.
You know, and part of the other part of it is too gonna be, and one of the things we talked about is the social media outreach as well. With the business directory, with what they do out there. And I always use the excuse of Christy, coming here from Northeast Iowa to work here, what's the first thing?
Cities.
Or Northwest Iowa, you knew what I meant,
I don't
I pointed that way.
Away, from away.
Yeah, somewhere else.
Education, government.
To say, you know what, you get offered a job in this area, what's the first thing you do? Google it, you know, and figure out what's gonna be. And when you pull up Cedar Valley area, that's what it's gonna come into.
What is 2021 versus just an
It's-
annual membership?
Their
Cedar
3-year
Falls,
campaign.
Rhinebeck,
Cities up?
So far, I don't see Elkhorn Heights or Raymond.
Rhinebeck and Waterloo.
Waterloo.
Waverly.
City of Waverly is a member. That
Did you
popped
just
up,
type city up?
that popped up immediately.
Yeah, 'cause didn't
Didn't Waverly just
They're back
go
in.
with
Cedar
that?
Falls, Rhinebeck, Waterloo, Waverly, and.
Years ago, Waverly was a
That's
member, and they dropped out, and I think
Rhinebeck-
Chris,
Rhinebeck's
you
your
met
only-
So
right?
as a
Just
chamber
come back
member,
in.
Hudson's not even listed in there?
No,
But
not
they
City
pay.
of Hudson, Hudson Community Chamber, you just do Hudson.
Come up under the city stuff.
Hudson Chamber of Commerce and Bill Caldwell Ford.
I think,
I mean, your average person,
but I also think,
and I'm
you-
counting myself as this average person. If I go and read Hudson Chamber of Commerce, that to me says City of Hudson too. I'm just saying, like,
we're also saying $1,000 a year for 3 years, we're not talking about $50,000 a year here too.
My mom always said, would you pick up $100,000 or $1,000 if it was laying on the street? Like, I mean.
No, I wouldn't, I'd leave it there.
Yeah.
I would
I mean-
totally leave it there.
In the grand scheme of things, it's not a lot of money, but the way we get to huge expenditures is by adding up a bunch of little.
Absolutely. I think that this is a project, or this is a group we should be involved with, personally.
I do too. I do from a 3-year perspective with all the stuff that we've got going on. And if at the end of 3 years, we feel we haven't gained it, we
I
drop it
think I'm
down.
with George on that one too.
Consider it under their economic development reserve, that we've got 197,000 reserved for economic development, not specifically anything targeted to spend it on. So it's
Not that we
something
need to
come out
look
of
for
reserve.
stuff to spend it on, because we've got it too.
Yeah.
But I think with all the growth that we're gonna have here in the next few years, it's something, at least for the next few years, we need to try to be a part of, and then we look at it again, and, you know,
So should we get with the chamber and say, how about you guys not do it and spend your money there, we'll spend our money there?
but then each individual business doesn't get it from a chamber perspective.
but it looks like Bill's paying separately
I think the
anyways.
chamber
Bill's
by
the only
default.
one.
The chamber by default is a member, because the Greater Cedar Valley Links took over for the local chambers, in
Mhm.
Waterloo and Cedar
They
Falls.
took over for Waterloo and Cedar Falls
Right.
only.
So you can't not be a member of the Greater Cedar Valley if you wanna join the local Chamber of Commerce in Waterloo or Cedar Falls, and then they approach the surrounding area, so.
So then there's, if that is true, then there's no outgo for the chamber to be a part of it
If-
currently. So
Right, if
by the
it's-
city then contributing, we're not technically doubling up
Correct.
an expense.
Yeah, it's the businesses of the chamber that are
So
members.
did you see?
I would request a motion to table so that we can get some more research on the chamber interaction and the city interaction and get that clarified for everybody.
I'm with that, but do we need to close this other open thing up?
No, I'm asking for a table of the motion that's on the floor.
No, so now
Just an
somebody needs,
amendment?
so,
It's
no,
just a
nobody's,
table, motion to table.
nobody's
Motion to
nobody's
table.
made a motion, so it's a motion to
Yeah,
table.
I
at this
move that we
point.
There was a motion and a second.
Yes.
Right,
Motion
but
and
now
second.
we,
Approve it? Yeah.
But a
I-
table
I-
motion
Oh.
can override it.
yes,
Seconded.
Okay, if she made a motion,
She can
then
amend
and I second it, we can still move to
you can,
table it
you
though.
can still move to table
Yeah.
it
Amend the
and.
table?
Yeah.
Correct.
And
It
then,
is simply a
and then
motion to
someone has to
table.
bring it up
In
from the
which case,
table
then
at the
it's
next
just-
meeting if
it's
we're
just
told by
last
the
meeting.
exact Roberts.
So I'll move to table it,
Do I hear
or
a second?
unless someone hasn't.
Second.
Second. Discussion on the motion to table. Roll call.
Just a second. Wasn't prepared for that. All right, Reister.
Aye.
Stabell.
Aye.
Wyatt. Engel.
Aye.
Buns.
Aye.
Okay, motion tabled. We will do some research and come back to the next meeting to bring it back to the floor.
I do see like Independence Chamber is on there, but the city of Independence is not on.
Yeah, sort of clarification. Good clarification request.
Yep.
Informational items, Hudson Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, January 16th, Park and Rec, January 17th, budget report, functional, revenue reports. Oh, those are the information items, sorry about that. Regular scheduled meetings held at council chambers, Public Works, February 14th, Mayor's Task Force, February 20th, Public Safety, February 22nd, Personnel, February 26th, next council meeting, the 12th, and then the 26th. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
So
thank you.
it's 30 degrees out and you're like, oh, let's wear flip-flops. Like, what
Hell,
the
you could
heck?
have stayed at the ghost hunt with me with